Welcome to the Phygital Dish, where we serve up fresh insights on how technology is bridging the gap between the physical and the digital, creating seamless and personalized interactions for businesses and consumers alike. Let's dig in.
Excited to be here again, and cannot believe that we are rolling into now what seems like episode after episode, but great things to talk about today. So Courtney, we're going to talk about something actually that you're an expert on, something that I hope to be an expert or near an expert on here in the future. But before we do that, I want to start with a little appetizer here. So as I was prepping for today's conversation around always-on connectivity, and it made me think about my cell phone. And just so happens that you and I happen to carry the same Google Pixel 9 Fold, right? Not an advertisement, but it's funny that we both have it, and we happen to also buy it on the same day, or near the same day. But it's what's interesting to me is, do you remember that first cell phone you had? Do you remember or let me put it a different way. Do you remember the first smartphone you had?
Oh man. Well, I remember both. I think the first cell phone I had was a bag phone.
Yeah.
It's just in the truck. The first smartphone I had, I don't even know what you'd call smart. I mean, really for me, I had what I would call maybe a smartphone. I think it was like a Samsung Blackjack or something, or maybe it was probably a BlackBerry. It was probably a BlackBerry.
Okay, yeah, BlackBerry.
Right? The scroll wheel on the side of it.
Wheel,
you had a couple apps, and probably a BlackBerry. Man.
Yeah. Well, the reason I bring that up is because if you think about it, right? Remember those? I still remember that first time that I had a BlackBerry, and I think I had something else in there as well. And I remember when the first iPhone came out, and it was like on-screen keyboard. That seems ridiculous. Yeah. However, I do remember taking road trips and going on airplanes and whatnot, and thinking to myself, oh man, I can actually send emails or be online or watch a video or whatnot anytime I want, right? And this idea of always ubiquitous connectivity started to become a thing. Yeah. And so, how do you feel about that now compared to then, like from a big perspective?
Yeah, well, I think in a couple ways, right? Is it really better? Now we're on these things all the time, right? Like now we can never put them down. So a little glass half full there, but you're absolutely right. We rely on the technology in our lives more than ever before. Most people honestly can't get by without their phone, and for good reason. It's their business. It's how they connect with their family and friends. It's it's how they shop. It's how they really run their lives. I was watching a commercial the other day. I think it was Geico or something else, maybe Allstate. They're all sitting around the dinner table, right? And it's, they're trying to have a conversation, and then the conversation goes like south. It's like a terrible conversation. And then the dad just goes, you know what? Just get back on your phones. Right. So, it's a catch-22, right? But we're heavily reliant on technology, especially this phone that sits in everybody's pockets or in their hands.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing now to be honest, from a heavily reliable on it or reliant on it, and you kind of talked about it, is the business applications now that rely on connectivity, right? If you look, I mean, I think this just because of the history slides that we have at SageNet, but if you really look back, 20 some years ago, SageNet was like, hey, you can put an internet connection in your retail space, and you can do credit card transactions, right? Who's going to need that? That's right. So I mean that idea now that it's become just, in many ways, it's the invisible layer. But I think that's actually what I really want to take some time today and talk about is, how is it not the invisible layer? And how is it important to the customer? How does it relate to the business? But then also from your perspective, what are those big pieces that come out of always on connectivity? So with that, kind of let's dive in a little bit. And I know you have a lot to kind of think about or say here around this. But give me that where do you think network sits today, other than that idea of, yes, it's there all the time, but from a technology perspective? But then also, just give us your thoughts on what does always on mean in your world?
Yeah, well, it's a good question because it can mean so many different things. If you look at similar to how you can't imagine yourself without a phone, I
Right.
can't imagine going into a business or a restaurant or something else where there's not some level of connectivity or interactivity. They're trying to create experiences, and why that is we've moved past just transactional, and we've now moved to
Right.
experiential. And so,
Right.
what drives that? Well, everybody assumes, or maybe not everybody, maybe not you and I, but a lot of people assume that just happens, right? All of this just
Sure.
you can throw this screen in here, this IoT, this
Yeah.
cloud POS, all that. It's just all going to work, right? Well,
Right. Right.
you hope so. If my voice wasn't hoarse today, I would sing you some Cinderella. You don't know what you got till it's gone, right? But a lot of that is if you build all of those new amazing things on an environment that was not conducive to that, a network that was not set up for that, you'll find really quick that it was the difference between a runaway success and a failure. So,
Yeah.
the, there's upwards of 50, 60 billion IoT devices coming online. Everything inside of a retail or restaurant is connected now. That's how they
Yeah.
interface with their customers and gain loyalty. So, I mean, it cannot be overstated or
Yeah.
how big network is just to the experiences that these brands are trying to create. And some are taking advantage of the new technologies that are out there. Some are catching up. Some were ahead of the curve. But there's honestly, there's a lot out there that just they're still in that mindset of, do I really need this connectivity in my environment? Do I need
Yeah.
all of this? I
Yeah.
think you do. I think they do, right?
Yeah, yeah. Do you think there's a place where people, because it's become so ubiquitous and so just assumed, that they
Hmm.
almost don't understand what it would mean to take it away?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we look at our houses. I have three internet connections coming into my house.
Yeah.
One because of
Right.
the business that I'm in, but also
Sure.
I did a scan of my network the other day. There's 155 devices on my network, and sometimes more than that. But a
Right.
business as well. There's just this assumption that, well, I got internet at my house. How hard could it be? Yeah,
Yeah.
but the moment
Yeah.
I'm on a meeting and if everybody in the house is streaming Netflix for some reason on three devices at the same
Yep.
time, how are they watching that? But now
Exactly.
extrapolate that to a business. You've got all of these things competing for priority. What's the most important priority? It's serving your
Right.
customers. So I
Sure.
think it's just assumption that, oh, we've got Wi-Fi or we've got internet coming in, we're completely good. I don't need to manage it further than that. A
Yeah.
lot of organizations have that mindset. They don't understand it. And so back to your question, right, of what is always on connectivity.
Yeah.
One of the most expensive things that, monthly recurring that's at these restaurants is internet connectivity. You're paying money for this per month. And a lot of organizations have taken the step towards like a backup circuit, right? Well, that's
Yeah.
another monthly recurring cost that you have. And
Right.
a backup by its name means you're expecting something to fail. And
Sure.
it's just
Right.
being left there as an insurance policy. Well, you want to have an insurance policy when something happens, but wouldn't it be nice to be putting that connectivity that you're already paying for to good use all the time, not having a backup? It moves you into this space of, I have a primary, I have a secondary, sometimes tertiary, because I cannot afford for my business to be down.
Yeah. Right.
Organizations, we were just at a conference a couple weeks ago, and restaurants talking about they want to move to as close to 100% digital sales as possible. Okay. Good luck with that if
crazy.
you don't have good internet connectivity, right? If you can't
Right.
reach the cloud, your customers
Right.
can't make orders and sales with you. More and more organizations are not taking cash as payment or frowning upon it.
Yeah.
So this always on connectivity means I always have to be on in the general sense, so like turned on internet, but I have to be
Yep.
on for my customers. Meaning, if I've created a great experience for them, if I've attracted customers to my organization because I've got this new shiny thing or this screen or this app or something else, they want to see that every time. The expectation is just like internet, the expectation that it's always going to be there. And so now it's not just in the literal sense of I'm always on, turned on, power, internet, all of that, but I'm always on every single time they come in my shop or my restaurant. That same experience I got them with last time better not fail me this time. That's really, the impetus of what always on connectivity is.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think that's actually something you and I talk about in parallel. And I think
Mm-hmm.
as we talk to more folks in the industry, we find that it's not as much parallel as on the same road. And
Right.
so that idea of the experiences that are my day to day, right? The
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
screens on a wall and the media players and interactive connectivity and a
Mm-hmm.
mobile interaction with loyalty, those are now also in that always on category, right? It's
Right.
not just POS, it's not just KDS traffic for a restaurant, but it's even going to that next layer of the consumer experience.
Yeah.
That kind of layers into this how does an organization make the how do you manage that foundational structure
Mm-hmm.
versus maybe that operational experience structure that might sit on top of it? How does that
Yeah.
come to life in that always on space?
Well, I think you have to have one. You got to have a reason for it, and it to be understood.
Yeah.
I more so now, organizations are understanding it because I think, marketing officers, digital officers, CEO, CFO, they see bottom line of what technology is bringing into
Right.
the organization. It's money,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
before I think network was again it was thought of. It's always there. I need it, but what is it really driving for me? Well, now it's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you're not making money when you don't have it. You know that you can't launch
Mm-hmm.
these new technologies without it. So it's more of
Yeah.
just we're at the forefront. 5 years ago, I think even further than that, I started saying and creating this always on connectivity. I said always on, right? Always on. And people are like,
Right.
yeah, yeah, I
Right.
hear you. SD-WAN
Right.
sounds great. It was a
Yeah.
nice to
Exactly.
have. Now it's a have to have. And that's really because, the people that are holding the purse strings, the people inside of these organizations that control the money, that are responsible for launching experience for the customers, they're knocking on IT's door saying, hey, why is my internet bad? Like, well,
Sure.
you
Yeah.
didn't give me budget 3 years
Right.
ago, and we have what we have. So,
Yep.
but the beauty of it is that network, if built right, is pretty resilient. If you put a little bit of money into that foundation and give it care and feeding over time, it can be pretty resilient. Especially as we bring on things like SD-WAN to utilize that traffic effectively. I've used this analogy before of you can throw a ton of bandwidth at it. That's great, right? That's
Right.
throwing something at the wall and seeing what sticks. But you've got that Lamborghini going down the highway, but then you're stuck behind you know insert slow car here, right?
Right.
You got to have those off ramps. You got to have the express
Yeah.
lanes. You got to be able to prioritize traffic effectively.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're in an era where it does take an investment, but a little investment and investment over time can go a long way. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where we're at today. There's so much technology available to them, so many ways to get that technology into the stores, manage it effectively. But sometimes it just takes I gotta have it. Somebody inside of the
Yeah.
organization's just they gotta do it, and it will
Yeah.
pay for itself over time.
Yeah, and I think you just hit on something that I think is really key, and I come from the digital side, and trust me, we have our fair share of acronyms. However, I will tell you, the network guys, including yourself, man, you got a lot of acronyms. Excuse me. And those acronyms, they come and they go, and I've learned
Oh
some of
yeah,
them, but SD-WAN's the easy one, but
hmm
SASE and Zero Touch and
and
yeah, and they
ZTNA
just
yeah, yeah, yeah,
right,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And so but you hit on something that I think is key in this conversation from the things that I've heard you speak about before, but also just from some of the customer conversations we've had, which is around a little bit of care and feeding goes a long way. So
Right.
how does an organization start that small spot? Like, what's the growth pattern there, right? How do they not jump in the pool at the deep end accidentally?
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't buy everything all at once if you can. You can bite off pieces. I like to say it was like Lego blocks. And you got to
Sure.
start with the big green thing, right?
Yeah.
The one that you put
Yeah.
everything onto.
Right.
And a lot
Right.
of times that's a huge investment, and that's one you want to get right. Thankfully, there's a lot of good providers out there. We work with a couple, the Fortinets of the world, the Meraki's of the world, and Cradle Points and others. Make the investment in that foundation, and then you can build things off of that. I've talked about this as it's your network ecosystem. It's your network platform, really. And you want to make investments in technology providers out there that have a really good ecosystem, either their own. I mean, it's fine to have their own ecosystem and their own platform,
Yeah.
but ones
Yeah.
that integrate with others as well. How does my network now inform this digital technology that I put out there? How does my network now help the IoT deployments that I have out there? So
Right.
making the investments up front and deciding, what does my ecosystem look like? What does my business look like, and which technology partners are out there, better inform and make my ecosystem, my brand's ecosystem, better. And one of the beauties of the technology now is network. Even just a couple years ago, network was really it was thought of as a set it and forget it thing, and by and large, it runs, right.
It runs.
I've seen organizations that have a switch or something that's been there for 20 years, it seems, right?
Right.
But it's still chugging along.
Yep.
But now we're treating network in a traditional hardware space. We're treating it with some touch from software. So the SD, right, is software defined networking,
Right.
meaning
Right.
it can grow over time. I've made this investment, and now it can be smarter as I make changes in my platform. The software can determine what's the best path. Do I need to have additional bandwidth, or do I just need to utilize the bandwidth I have more effectively? So, now it's my infrastructure gets better as I make updates to my traditionally long-lived hardware. I can continue to iterate that over time. And that's one of the best things about making that great investment up front. If you make a good one, which there's a lot of good options out there, the software will allow you to make way better use of it over time, than you'll ever get from that initial hardware investment.
Yeah, that's interesting, and as I listen to you talk, I think both of us have been around the block enough that we know that as you start to talk about this idea of SD-WAN being maybe smarter in day 300 or 500 than it was on day one, all of a sudden somebody's going to ask, oh, can AI play into that? Yeah, maybe, but don't jump in the deep end too quick, right?
Right. We don't need to do all the, machine learning and AI and all these are built into the platforms, and they're continuing to be iterated on. But what I would say is this: start simple. Start simple. Deploy your technology, have it learn a little bit about your environment, set up some interesting SD-WAN policies, and watch it go. Let it go. It's going to be better than what you had before, most likely. And then you can look at what is AI and machine learning and SASE and all of these things do for you. But you don't have to, eat the whole elephant right away. You can bite little pieces off.
There you go. And by the way, that's very fitting for our main course, right? Just take some few pieces. Just take a few pieces off.
The network is an elephant, though. It really is. It's what everything else rides on. Here's what I would say. A lot of times you don't know when you have a good one, but you know when you got a bad network, right? Because it goes back to, if you've done it right, it becomes that. Well, it's just always here, right? Yeah, because we designed it that way. We designed it with resiliency, reliability, and redundancy in mind. So your customers, your employees, nobody ever knows it's there, but you know when it's not. Yeah, that's the big thing.
Yeah, and even if we think about, we've talked about our time at NACS and whatnot. We were talking about superpowers. When it is invisible, it is a superpower.
Exactly.
Right? But to your point, when it's bad, it's bad.
It's bad. And that brings to a point of it. Now it's not just the networking component of it, because that 55, 60 billion, IoT devices out there, the digital side, the loyalty apps, the multi-cloud, what else does that bring? You previously had a house, maybe you had a front door and a back door, but now the network of these organizations is like an apartment building. It's windows and doors and things everywhere. And I'm talking about that, as like security risk, not just like, it's not an apartment with doors and windows from a network standpoint, but also from a security standpoint. You have no idea, some of these IoT providers that are out there, some of the technology that's brought into these organizations, what are their security standards? So now it's assumed that, well, if I just put it on the network, it's fine. Well, is it? Was it designed that way? And so now the network becomes this central point for security as well. So most of the networks that we see deployed and that we deploy are done, another acronym, on an NGFW, a next generation firewall, meaning it's got networking components, it's got security components, it's got software defined things in it. So it really serves a lot of purposes. Again, it means make a good investment up front, because it's going to be serving multiple different purposes inside of the organization. So security is a huge one that introduces, a lot of risk from the cloud and IoT and everything else going into these environments. So that's another consideration that organizations have to have.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, if we think just a little bit about kind of a sweet dessert, right? Wrapping this up, one of my one I think one of the things that I think of kind of right away when we think about this, from you mentioned the Lego example, but if you think about tiramisu, right, all these layers of chocolate and cheese and whatnot, and goodness, that idea though, you hit on security, you hit on the firewall infrastructure, right, local LAN kind of stack infrastructure, you hit on the general connectivity and traffic infrastructure, and you also hit on this idea of letting it grow over time. But do you see, as you see those Legos fit together, are they all equal, or do they move in weight, or kind of how do you manage that? And just from a general kind of wrap up thought process around network, where do you start in that conversation? When you're going to stick your fork in and try one of those layers, what's that one that you should really make sure is right to start?
Yeah, so they're not all equal. They're equally important because, again, they're all pieces to this puzzle. That central point, that firewall, that router, obviously that's extremely important, but what you plug into it's important too. And just like it's evolved over the last couple of years of, what technology from firewalls and switches and access points and all of that, we could get into that all day long. That's evolved, but the connectivity that goes into it has evolved as well. So you think of, back to the cell phone conversation, man, we were on 3G networks maybe back then, right? And so then we went to 4G, then we went to LTE, LTE Advanced, 5G. The promise of 5G was great. We still haven't really reached it yet, but the super low latency 5G, it is coming, just not as fast as we'd like. But think about this, 2027, they're supposed to ratify 6G. Oh. So we're gonna be going to the new standard. All the 3G bands are going to go away, and then we also have SageNet, SpaceNet, traditional, was a satellite company, and so we had medium orbit, geo satellites, and then there's LEO satellites, low Earth orbit, so Starlink and others. So the options for connectivity there's tons of them. Thankfully, because we support a lot of organizations that are very rural. They previously didn't have a lot of options, but now there's so many more options for them. So the firewall, that core component, I think that's your big Lego block. That's the green thing you put it on. But the pieces that go into it, the connectivity, also make smart choices in that connectivity. You're going to be paying for them monthly. Make sure that if you're using them all the time. Don't just have a backup. Don't just say I'm expecting failure. No. I'm not expecting failure. I'm designing for success all the time. I think that's critically important.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I think that's a fantastic place to kind of wrap through this, because I think, as you said, right, that green Lego block, that baseline of router, switch, firewall, and that stack is so important. But what are you putting into it is so key. What's on the other end of it is so key, right? When I walk in the door when I walk in the door with my creative visual toys and I go, okay, Courtney, make this work on the network, right?
Yeah.
What are we putting out there? But at the same time, I think it's all about taking the right bites and really helping that grow. Well, I think that's amazing. Now, as always, when I talk to you, I learn some new acronym. So now I have NGFW, right?
There you go.
I'm in on that. I like that one. That one's good. You slipped one in there towards the end, the LEO reference to satellite, so low orbit. And by the way, I'm a user of low orbit. I'm actually I'm a Starlink user at one of my family properties. So, and
how do you like it? So, how do you like it? I mean,
I love
good,
it,
right?
actually.
Yeah.
It's actually I used to have point to point, cellular style, which was, although relatively consistent, it was very slow. This is extremely consistent. It's actually a very good connection. I always mark my satisfaction based on how much my boys complain about how the gaming world is working on that, and it actually works very well.
Not much.
So
Okay.
easy
Well,
to
good.
set up, easy to get up and running, and a
Nice.
very consistent.
Yeah, glowing recommendation there. So yeah, if they can
That's right,
stream and they can
that's right.
game, it gets
Gaming.
the IV sign of approval.
You got it. You got it. So, well, excellent to talk with you as always,
Yeah.
Court. Thank you for joining. These things, we're getting good at this. We're
Hey,
now we
yeah,
just
good.
gotta-
I mean,
we gotta-
we're serviceable. We're manageable.
we're
Well,
serviceable. That's right. That's right. So, and thank you to everybody who's listening to the Phygital Dish. We look forward to talking technology and retail and restaurant and whatnot in the future, and we'll see you all soon.
Yep.
Thanks for tuning in to the Phygital Dish, where physical and digital worlds collide to transform industries and consumer experiences. We hope today's episode gave you the insight you need to stay ahead in this evolving landscape. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and join us next time for another serving of industry advice and innovations from the intersection of technology and business. And remember, stay inspired, keep innovating, and we'll catch you next time.